The Letter Bearer. Part 1. The Golden Cage. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Ashmore House, casting long shadows across the marble floor of the music room. Elena Ashmore sat at the pianoforte, her fingers moving mechanically across the keys, playing a sonata she had performed 100 times before. At 17, she knew every room of this grand estate, every garden path, every portrait that lined the hallways. And she was suffocating. "Shoulders back, Elena." Her mother's voice cut through the melody. Lady Margaret Ashmore sat on the velvet settee, her embroidery forgotten in her lap, as she watched her daughter with critical eyes. A lady does not slouch, even when she plays. Elena straightened her posture, but felt the familiar weight settle deeper into her chest. 3 more months. In 3 months, she would marry Lord Edmund Hartwick, a man 30 years her senior, whom she had met exactly twice. The first time, he had looked at her as one might appraise a horse at market. The second time, he had not looked at her at all, spending the entire visit discussing hunting rights with her father. "That's better," her mother said, returning to her needlework. "Lord Hartwick expects excellence in all things. You must be perfect for him." Perfect. The word tasted like ash in Eleanor's mouth. She transitioned to a new piece, something darker, more turbulent. Her music teacher, old Mr. Pemberton, had forbidden her from playing it. "Too passionate for a young lady," he had said. "Not suitable." But Mr. Pemberton came only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and today was Friday. The notes swelled and crashed like waves against rocks, and for a moment Eleanor forgot the walls around her. She forgot the wedding dress being fitted in her chamber upstairs. Forgot the guest list her mother reviewed each evening. Forgot the future that had been decided without her consent. "Elena!" Her mother's sharp voice shattered the moment. "What on earth are you playing? Stop at once!" Eleanor's hands froze above the keys. Before she could respond, the door to the music room burst open, and her younger brother Thomas bounded in, his face flushed with excitement. "Mama, Papa says we have a visitor. A messenger from London with urgent news." Lady Margaret rose swiftly, her embroidery tumbling to the floor. "From London? Did your father say who?" "No, but he looked terribly serious. He's asked for you in his study immediately." As her mother swept from the room, Thomas grinned at Eleanor. At 14, he still possessed the freedom she had lost somewhere between childhood and the expectations of womanhood. He could ride his horse across the countryside, could speak his mind at dinner, could dream of his future as something more than a transaction between families. "What do you think it is?" he asked, throwing himself into the chair their mother had vacated. "Probably something to do with father's business in Parliament," Elena said, closing the lid over the piano keys. "Or perhaps news about the war? I hope it's something exciting. Nothing ever happens here." Eleanor wanted to laugh at the irony. Nothing exciting ever happened to her, perhaps. But the world beyond Ashmore's gates seemed to churn with possibility. The war with France, the debates in Parliament, the changing tides of commerce and industry. But these were things that happened to men, decided by men, for men. She moved to the window, gazing out at the manicured gardens. Beyond the hedge maze, beyond the stone walls, the moor stretched wild and free. She had not been allowed to walk there since her engagement. Too dangerous, her father had said. What if something happened to you before the wedding? As if her only value was in arriving undamaged to her wedding night. Elena? Thomas's voice softened. Are you all right? She turned to him, forcing a smile. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? But Thomas knew her too well. They had been allies since childhood, partners in mischief before the world began to split them onto different paths. You don't have to marry him, you know. Don't be foolish, Thomas. Of course I do. You could run away, take a horse in the night and ride to London. I'd help you. The offer, as impossible as it was, touched her deeply. She crossed the room and kissed the top of his head. You're a good brother. But running away would ruin not just my life, but yours as well. And Mama's and Papa's. The scandal would destroy our family. Then the world is stupid, Thomas declared with the righteous certainty of youth. Yes, Elena agreed quietly. It often is. The sound of raised voices echoed from somewhere in the house, unusual in the Ashmore household where decorum reigned supreme. Thomas jumped up, pressing his ear to the door. I can't hear what they're saying, but Papa sounds angry. Elena moved beside him, her heart suddenly racing with an emotion she couldn't name. Something was happening. Something was changing. The door opened so suddenly that both she and Thomas stumbled backward. Their father stood in the doorway, his face grave. Lord William Ashmore was not a man given to displays of emotion, but Eleanor could read the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Eleanor, Thomas, come with me. Your mother and I need to speak with you both. They followed him to his study, a room that smelled of leather and tobacco, lined with books that Eleanor had never been allowed to read. Too complex for a female mind, her father had said when she was 12, and curious. After that, she had simply stolen them at night, reading by candlelight and returning them before dawn. Her mother sat in one of the wing-back chairs, a handkerchief pressed to her lips. On her father's desk lay an open letter, the seal broken, the paper expensive and official-looking. Sit down, both of you, Lord Ashmore commanded. Eleanor's stomach twisted with anxiety. Whatever this news was, it was not good. Her father remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back, in a military posture left over from his youth. I have received word from London. There has been a development in Parliament regarding Lord Hartwick. Elena's breath caught. She dared not hope, dared not even think what she desperately wanted to hear. He has been arrested, her father continued, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Accused of treason. Apparently, he has been passing information to French agents for the past 2 years. The room seemed to tilt. Eleanor gripped the arms of her chair, afraid she might faint. Treason. Lord Hartwick was a traitor. Does this mean... she began, but her mother's sob cut her off. It means we are ruined, Lady Margaret wailed. The engagement, the connection to our family, the scandal. We are absolutely ruined. Calm yourself, Margaret, Lord Ashmore said, though his own face had gone pale. We were not aware of his activities. Surely no blame will fall on us. Won't it? Her mother's voice rose hysterically. Everyone will know that our daughter was engaged to a traitor. How will we ever show our faces in society again? How will we ever find her another suitable match? Thomas caught Eleanor's eye, and she saw the corner of his mouth twitch upward. He was trying not to smile, and suddenly, inappropriately, she wanted to laugh too. She pressed her lips together hard, knowing that any sign of relief would be seen as improper. "What will happen to Lord Hartwick?" Thomas asked. "If found guilty, he will be hanged," their father said bluntly. "His estates will be seized by the crown. His title will be stripped." "William," Lady Margaret gasped. "The children." But Eleanor needed to know, needed to understand the full extent of what this meant. "And what of our engagement, father?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Was it regret? "It is dissolved, of course. Under the circumstances, no one would expect otherwise." Freedom. The words sang through Eleanor's veins like the most beautiful music she had ever played. She was free. But the expression on her father's face told her that freedom might come at a cost she had not yet calculated. Part 2. The Messenger. The investigation that followed consumed Ashmore House like a fever. Men in official-looking coats came and went, asking questions, examining the correspondence between the families, reviewing the contracts that had been drawn up for the marriage settlement. Elena's father spent long hours closeted in his study, and her mother took to her bed, claiming nerves. Through it all, Elena moved like a ghost through the house, uncertain whether she should mourn the scandal or celebrate her liberation. Society's rule said she should be devastated, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. It was on a grey Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after the initial news, that everything changed again. Elena was in the library, finally free to read whatever she pleased without fear of censure. Her parents were too distracted to monitor her activities, and she had been devouring books on history, philosophy, and politics. She was deep into a treatise on the rights of man when the butler appeared at the door. "Miss Elena, there is a young man here to see you. He says he has information regarding Lord Hartwick's arrest." Eleanor set down her book, her heart suddenly pounding. "Did he give his name?" "He said to tell you he is a friend of justice." The butler's expression suggested he found this proclamation ridiculous. But Eleanor was intrigued. "Show him to the morning room. I'll be there directly." She checked her reflection in the mirror hanging near the door. Her dark hair was coming loose from its pins, and there was a smudge of ink on her left hand from taking notes. For a moment, she considered going to her chamber to make herself more presentable, then decided against it. If this mysterious visitor had information about the scandal, she wanted to hear it immediately. The morning room was bright with afternoon sun when she entered. A young man stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out at the gardens. He wore a simple dark coat and breeches, nothing fashionable or expensive. His hair, dark brown and slightly too long, was tied back with a plain ribbon. When he turned at the sound of her entrance, Eleanor forgot to breathe. He was perhaps 20, with hazel eyes that seemed to see everything, a strong jaw, and an expression of intense intelligence. But it was not his handsomeness that stopped her. It was the way he looked at her, directly and without presumption, as though she were a person rather than an object to be appraised. "Miss Ashmore," he said, bowing. "Thank you for seeing me. My name is Daniel Thorne. Mr. Thorne." She moved into the room but didn't sit, keeping the furniture between them as propriety demanded. "My butler said you have information about Lord Hartwick." "I do." He glanced toward the door. "Though what I have to say is sensitive. Is there any chance we might be overheard?" Elena considered. The servants were loyal, but servants talked, and whatever this young man had to say, she sensed it was important. "We can speak freely here, but I will leave the door open. I'm sure you understand." A smile flickered across his face. Of course, propriety must be observed even in matters of treason. There was something in his tone, not quite mockery, but not quite respect either, that intrigued her. "Who are you, Mr. Thorne?" "Truly? I work for a certain branch of the government, one that operates quietly, investigating threats to the crown. I was part of the team that uncovered Lord Hartwick's treachery." Elena sank into the nearest chair, forgetting propriety. "You were? But why come here? Why speak to me?" Daniel Thorne moved closer, but remained standing, maintaining proper distance. "Because Lord Hartwick did not act alone. He had assistants, accomplices within society who helped him gather and transmit information. We have evidence of letters, meetings, exchanges of documents." Cold dread replaced the warmth of curiosity. "And you think someone in my family was involved?" "No," he said quickly. "No, Miss Ashmore. We have found no evidence implicating any member of your family. But Lord Hartwick was using your engagement as cover. He told his associates that he needed to travel frequently to Ashmore House for courtship purposes, when in reality he was meeting with French agents along the route." Elena tried to process this information. "So we were, what, convenient?" "More than convenient. You were essential to his deception. And now, Miss Ashmore, we need your help." "My help? What could I possibly do?" Daniel reached into his coat and withdrew a letter, sealed with red wax. "We have intercepted this. It's addressed to you, from a woman claiming to be Lord Hartwick's cousin, expressing sympathy for the broken engagement and inviting you to visit her in Bath to recover from the scandal." "I've never heard Lord Hartwick mention a cousin," Elena said slowly. "That's because he doesn't have one. At least, not one named Margaret Hartwick residing in Bath. We believe this is an attempt by Hartwick's associates to make contact with you, to determine what, if anything, he might have revealed to your family before his arrest." Elena stared at the letter in his hand, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through her. "And you want me to go? To meet with these people?" "We want you to write back, accepting the invitation. When you arrive in Bath, you will be watched, protected. But these traitors need to believe they are meeting with an innocent young woman, devastated by scandal, vulnerable to manipulation. In other words, they need to believe I am exactly what society expects me to be," Elena said, a trace of bitterness in her voice. "Weak, foolish, and easily led?" Daniel's expression shifted, something like respect entering his eyes. "Yes, though I suspect you are none of those things, Miss Ashmore. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink, the space between them charged with something Elena could not name. She thought of the weeks ahead, the same routine, the same suffocating expectations. Her mother would recover from her hysteria and begin searching for a new match. Another Lord Hartwick, perhaps less treasonous, but equally indifferent to who she was as a person. Or she could do this, could step outside the golden cage and into a world of danger and purpose. What would I have to do? She asked. Daniel's face lit with something that might have been admiration. Are you agreeing to help? I'm considering it. But I need to know everything. What risks am I taking? What exactly would be expected of me? He pulled a chair closer, sitting down and leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. It was an informal posture, one that would have scandalized her mother. But Elena found it refreshing. The risks are real, he said seriously. These people are dangerous. They have committed treason, and they will not hesitate to silence anyone they perceive as a threat. However, you would never be alone. I would accompany you to Bath, posing as a distant family friend, escorting you for propriety's sake. Other agents would be positioned throughout the city. We would know where you are at all times. And what would I need to do once I'm there? Build trust with whoever makes contact. Listen carefully to everything they say. Look for documents, names, anything that might lead us to other members of their network. And most importantly, make them believe you know nothing of value. Deception, Elena said softly. You're asking me to become a spy. I suppose I am, Daniel admitted. It's dangerous work, Miss Ashmore. I won't pretend otherwise. If you refuse, no one would think less of you. This is not your fight. But as Elena sat there, she realized it was her fight. Or rather, she wanted it to be. For 17 years she had been told what to do, what to think, who to be. Every choice had been made for her, from the clothes she wore to the man she would marry. And now, finally, someone was asking her what she wanted. I'll do it, she said. Daniel studied her face, searching for doubt. Are you certain? Take time to think about it. Discuss it with your family. Elena laughed, the sound sharp and sudden. My family? My mother would have an apoplexy, and my father would lock me in my room. No, Mr. Thorne. If I'm to do this, they cannot know the truth. Then what will you tell them? She thought quickly. That I received an invitation from an old school friend in Bath. That I wish to escape the scandal and gossip for a few weeks. My mother will be relieved to have me out of the way. And my father will be too busy protecting our family name to object strongly. And your brother? Daniel asked. The butler mentioned you have a younger brother. Will he cause complications? The mention of Thomas made Elena pause. Thomas, who had offered to help her run away. Thomas, who saw the injustice of the world even at 14. No, she said finally. Thomas will keep my secrets. Daniel rose and Elena stood as well. He bowed formally, but when he met her eyes again, there was warmth there, and something else. Respect, certainly. Perhaps even the beginning of friendship. Then we have much to prepare, Miss Ashmore. I will send word through proper channels about the arrangements. In the meantime, you should respond to the letter, accepting the invitation. right as you imagine a heartbroken young woman would. Be vulnerable. Be naive. In other words, be everything I'm not, Elena said with a wry smile. Daniel's returning smile was brilliant, transforming his serious face into something younger, more open. Precisely. Though I suspect you could be a fine actress if you choose. After he left, Elena stood in the morning room for a long time, holding the forged letter in her hands. She knew she should be frightened, should be reconsidering her impulsive agreement. But instead, she felt alive in a way she never had before. She was going to be a spy. She was going to do something that mattered, something real. And she was going to do it alongside Daniel Thorne, the man who looked at her like she was capable of extraordinary things. The next few weeks would test that capability. And perhaps, Elena thought, as she tucked the letter into her pocket, she would finally discover who she truly was, beneath all the layers of expectation and propriety. Part 3. The Journey to Bath. Convincing her parents proved easier than Elena anticipated. Her mother was still too consumed with social anxiety to object strongly to anything that removed Elena from local scrutiny. Her father, after a tense discussion in his study, agreed that a few weeks in Bath, under the chaperonage of Lady Catherine Winters, the fictitious Aunt Daniel's organization had invented, would be acceptable. Perhaps it will give the gossips time to move on to fresher scandals, Lord Ashmore said wearily. And Lady Catherine is respectable enough. If only he knew, Elena thought, that Lady Catherine was actually another agent, a woman in her 50s who had been serving the Crown in various capacities for decades. The only difficult moment came with Thomas. He cornered her in the library the night before her departure, his young face serious beyond his years. "You're not really going to visit a school friend, are you?" he said without preamble. Eleanor's heart skipped. "What makes you say that?" "Because you never mention any school friends. Because you've been different since that man came to visit. Because I know you, Elena. And I know when you're hiding something." She should have lied, should have maintained the fiction. But looking at her brother's earnest face, she couldn't. Instead, she pulled him into the corner farthest from the door and told him a version of the truth, edited, simplified, but true enough. His eyes grew wide as she spoke. "You're going to catch traitors? That's brilliant!" "It's dangerous," Elena corrected. "And you cannot tell anyone, Thomas. Not Mama, not Papa, not even your closest friend. Lives may depend on this secret." Thomas drew himself up with teenage dignity. "I won't tell. I swear it on my honor." Then more quietly, "But Eleanor, please be careful. If anything happened to you..." She hugged him tightly. "I'll be careful. I promise." The morning of departure arrived grey and drizzling. Elena wore a travelling dress of deep blue, practical and warm, with her mother's pearls at her throat and her hair pinned severely under her bonnet. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be. A young lady of quality, subdued by scandal, seeking refuge in a spa town. The carriage that arrived was suitably elegant, the horses well bred. And sitting inside, reading a newspaper as though he had every right to be there, was Daniel Thorne. He looked different in gentleman's clothing, still not fashionable. His coat was at least 2 seasons old, and his cravat was tied simply, rather than in the elaborate styles young men currently favoured. But he looked respectable, like a younger son of good family who had to make his own way in the world. "Miss Ashmore," he said, rising to help her into the carriage. "I trust you're ready for our journey." "As ready as I can be, Mr. Thorne." She settled onto the opposite seat, very aware of the need to maintain propriety, even as they embarked on something highly improper. As the carriage pulled away from Ashmore House, Elena watched her home disappear behind the rain-streaked window. She had never travelled without her mother before, had never been beyond the county without a phalanx of servants and family members surrounding her. "Nervous?" Daniel asked, folding his newspaper. "Terrified," Elena admitted. "But also excited. Is that strange?" "Not at all. Fear and exhilaration often walk hand in hand." He studied her face. "Though I meant what I said before. If at any point you wish to turn back, we can arrange it." "I won't turn back," Elena said firmly. Then, because curiosity was eating at her, "How did you come to do this work, Mr. Thorne? It seems an unusual occupation." A shadow crossed his face. "My father was a diplomat, stationed in Paris before the revolution. He saw what was coming, warned the government, but no one listened. When the violence began, he helped many people escape British citizens, French aristocrats who had been friendly to Britain, anyone he could save. He was caught in the process, executed." "I'm so sorry," Elena said softly. "I was 8 years old. My mother brought me back to England, and I grew up knowing that sometimes good men die because evil men go unchallenged. When I was old enough, I sought out opportunities to continue my father's work, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." "That's admirable," Elena said. Daniel shook his head. "It's necessary. There's a difference." He paused, then added, "And what of you, Miss Ashmore? What drives you to take such risks?" Elena considered the question. She could give him a simple answer, something about patriotic duty or outrage at Lord Hartwick's betrayal. But after his honesty, he deserved hers. "I've spent my entire life being ornamental," she said finally. "A daughter to be married off for advantage. A woman whose only value is in producing heirs and managing a household. Even my education was designed to make me more appealing to potential husbands. Accomplishments, not knowledge. Decoration, not substance." She met his eyes across the carriage. "This is my chance to be something more. To prove, if only to myself, that I'm capable of more than embroidery and small talk. I think anyone who has spoken with you for 5 minutes would know you're capable of more than that," Daniel said quietly. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. She looked away, watching the countryside roll past. They were heading south and west, toward Bath, toward danger, toward purpose. The journey took 2 days with an overnight stop at a coaching inn. Lady Catherine met them there, a formidable woman with sharp eyes and an imperious manner that suggested she really could be an aristocratic aunt. She whisked Eleanor away to a private room, leaving Daniel to his own devices. "Let's talk plainly," Lady Catherine said once they were alone. "Daniel is a good agent, but he's young and sometimes idealistic. He may have painted this operation as less dangerous than it is." "He was honest about the risks," Elena replied. Was he honest about the kind of people you'll be dealing with? These aren't gentlemen playing at revolution, child. They're fanatics who have betrayed their country for ideology or gold or both. If they suspect you're anything other than what you appear to be, they will kill you. The blunt words hit like a physical blow. Elena swallowed hard. I understand. Do you? Lady Catherine's gaze was penetrating. You're 17 years old, from a sheltered life. You've never seen violence, never experienced real danger. Are you certain you can carry this through? Elena thought about her life at Ashmore House, about the future that had been planned for her, about all the women who had come before her, living and dying within the narrow confines society allowed them, about all the women who would come after, unless something changed. I'm certain, she said. Lady Catherine studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. Then let's prepare you properly. Sit down, and I'll tell you what you need to know about Margaret Hartwick, or rather, the woman pretending to be her. They talked late into the night. Lady Catherine explained the intelligence they had gathered, the patterns they had observed, the network of traitors that Lord Hartwick had been part of. Elena learned about dead drops and coded messages, about how to memorize information without writing it down, about subtle signals she could use if she felt threatened. It was like learning a new language, one spoken in gestures and implications rather than words. And Elena, to her surprise, found she had an aptitude for it. You're a quick study, Lady Catherine said approvingly. Natural talent for deception. That's good. You'll need it. When Elena finally returned to her room, her head was spinning with information. She lay awake for hours, listening to the sounds of the inn footsteps in the corridor, voices from the taproom below, horses in the courtyard. Every sound seemed ominous, every shadow a potential threat. But beneath the fear was something else. Anticipation, purpose. For the first time in her life, she was doing something that mattered. The next morning, they continued toward Bath. The rain had cleared, and the sun broke through clouds as they descended into the valley where the city lay. Elena had visited Bath once as a child, vaguely remembered the golden stone buildings and the smell of the thermal springs. Now, approaching as something more than a tourist, she saw it differently. It was a city of gossip and intrigue, where people came to see and be seen, where society's rules were slightly relaxed, but all the more viciously enforced for their apparent flexibility. It was, in other words, perfect cover for people who needed to move in society while conducting darker business. Their lodgings were on the Royal Crescent, elegant apartments that Lady Catherine had secured under the name Lady Winters. Daniel had his own rooms nearby, close enough to respond to trouble, but distant enough to maintain propriety. Tomorrow, you'll take the waters and walk in the pump room, Lady Catherine instructed. Make yourself visible. Margaret Hartwick, or whoever is using that name, will find you. That night, Elena stood at her bedroom window, looking out over the curved row of townhouses, the city spreading below. Somewhere out there, traitors moved through society, trading secrets that could cost British lives. And somewhere out there, Daniel Thorne was preparing to protect her as she helped stop them. She touched the window glass, cool against her fingertips. Whatever happened next, she would face it. not as the sheltered girl who had left Ashmore House, but as someone new, someone capable, someone who mattered. Part 4. The game begins. The pump room was crowded when Elena entered the next morning, Lady Catherine at her side. Fashionable bath society circulated under the high ceilings, taking the waters, gossiping, conducting the intricate social dances that defined their world. Elena wore a pale green dress that was pretty without being ostentatious. Her hair styled simply under a matching bonnet. She was supposed to look vulnerable, approachable, a wounded bird ready to be helped or preyed upon. "Remember," Lady Catherine murmured as they collected glasses of the famous bath water. "You are heartbroken, but maintaining dignity. Confused about Lord Hartwick's betrayal, but willing to believe there must be some mistake. Naive, but not stupid." "I understand," Elena replied quietly. They had barely taken 3 steps into the room when a woman approached. She was perhaps 40, elegantly dressed in deep purple, with dark hair elaborately arranged and intelligent eyes that assessed Elena thoroughly. "Lady Winters?" the woman inquired. "I believe I heard you were visiting Bath. I am Mrs. Delacroix. We met in London some years ago, though you may not remember." "Mrs. Delacroix," Lady Catherine responded with perfect aristocratic warmth. "Of course I remember. How lovely to see you again." The social formalities followed. Introductions, polite inquiries about health and family, the careful dance of society. But Elena noticed Mrs. Delacroix's attention kept returning to her, assessing, measuring. "And this is your niece?" Mrs. Delacroix finally asked. "My niece, Miss Eleanor Ashmore," Lady Catherine confirmed. "She's visiting me to escape some unfortunate gossip." "Ah." Understanding, or the appearance of it, dawned on Mrs. Delacroix's face. "The Lord Hartwick situation. How terrible for you, my dear. Such a shocking betrayal." Eleanor summoned tears to her eyes, not difficult when she thought about everything that had happened. "I still can't believe it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Lord Hartwick seemed so honourable." "These things are often a surprise," Mrs. Delacroix said sympathetically. "But you must not let this ruin your prospects, Miss Ashmore. You are innocent of any wrongdoing." They talked for a few more minutes before Mrs. Delacroix moved on. Eleanor glanced at Lady Catherine, who gave the slightest nod. That had been the contact. Mrs. Delacroix was almost certainly working with Margaret Hartwick, assessing whether Eleanor was worth approaching. Over the next few days, Eleanor fell into a routine. Mornings in the pump room, afternoons walking in Sydney Gardens or visiting the shops on Milsom Street. Evenings at small gatherings, Lady Catherine arranged or attending the theatre. And everywhere, Eleanor played her role. The wounded young woman, confused and hurt, seeking sympathy and understanding. Daniel shadowed her movements, never obvious but always there. Sometimes he appeared as another visitor to the pump room, sometimes as a fellow theatre-goer. Once as someone feeding the ducks at the pond while she walked past. His presence was both reassuring and unsettling. She found herself looking for him, wanting to catch his eye, needing the reminder that she wasn't alone in this deception. It was on the 5th day that Margaret Hartwick finally appeared. Eleanor was sitting in Sydney Gardens, sketching flowers in a small book another accomplishment young ladies were supposed to possess. Lady Catherine was nearby, supposedly reading but actually alert to everything around them. The day was warm, and families promenaded through the gardens in their finest clothes. "Miss Ashmore?" a voice said. "Forgive me for approaching without introduction, but I believe you received my letter." Elena looked up to see a woman in her 30s, elegantly dressed, with blonde hair and cold blue eyes that contrasted sharply with her warm smile. This was Margaret Hartwick, or the woman pretending to be her. "Mrs. Hartwick." Elena set down her sketchbook and rose. "I'm so glad to finally meet you. Your letter was so kind." "My dear child, of course I had to reach out. The situation with my cousin, well, I cannot apologize enough for the pain he has caused you." They sat together on the bench, Lady Catherine discreetly moving closer while maintaining the appearance of absorbed reading. Margaret Hartwick launched into a practiced tale of family disappointment, of shock at her cousin's actions, of sympathy for Eleanor's plight. And through it all, Eleanor played her part. She dabbed at her eyes with the handkerchief. She expressed confusion and hurt. She asked questions that seemed naive, but were designed to draw out information. "I just don't understand how it happened," Eleanor said. Lord Hartwick seemed so devoted to British interests. He spoke often of his work in Parliament. "Men can hide darkness in their hearts," Margaret replied, her hand covering Eleanor's. "But you must not blame yourself, my dear. You could not have known." "Did you know him well?" Eleanor asked. "As his cousin, I mean. Did you ever suspect?" It was a careful question, designed to seem innocent, while actually probing for connections, for information about the network. Margaret's expression flickered for just a moment. Was that calculation in her eyes? Before settling back into sympathy. "I had not seen him often in recent years," she said carefully. "Family disagreements, you understand. But I never imagined he was capable of such betrayal." They talked for another 30 minutes before Margaret suggested that Eleanor join her for tea the following day. "I have a small circle of friends who gather regularly. We are all ladies who have faced scandal or difficulty in our lives. I think you would find it comforting, my dear." After Margaret left, Lady Catherine joined Elena on the bench. "Well done," she murmured. "She's testing you, trying to determine if you're useful to them." "What do you mean, useful?" Eleanor asked quietly. "They don't know what Lord Hartwick might have told you or your family before his arrest. You could have information they need, or you could be vulnerable enough to be recruited." The thought sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. "Recruited? As a spy? Why not? You're young, well-connected, and now desperate for a new match after,